Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Carl's Cubase tutorials. Building on a little bit from the first one and thinking about your compositions, we're going to be having a look today at sidechain compression and how we can use sidechaining in different ways. I'm going to look at two particular techniques. One is using it with a compressor to create kind of like a pulsing effect, so like a ducking effect. It's a very common thing that you hear in modern sort of house and stuff like that. And we're also going to be looking at how we can attach that instead to a noise gate as well and trigger a noise gate to create kind of like a stuttering effect. And I'll explain how those things work today. Try and make this one a little bit shorter than the first one. The first one was 18 minutes, so I'm going to try and cut that down quite considerably. So anyway, so first of all, what we need to think a little bit about is what sidechaining is. And sidechaining is really simple. Sidechaining is simply just triggering an external processor from an audio send feed signal. All right. So, for example, the most common thing that we do is what we call the ducking effect, where, say, for example, a mix could be brought down in volume by a compressor when triggered, when that compressor is activated by an incoming audio signal. So, for example, the bass drum is commonly used. So when you want the bass drum to power through, so the mix ducks as the bass drum triggers the compressor. So bass drum activate, you hear the bass drum, the audio trigger sends a signal to the compressor to activate, the compressor ducks and reduces the level of the signal. When the bass drum goes, the signal then returns back to normal level. And that's basically how it works. So the sidechain is basically using an external trigger, an external audio signal, in this case the bass drum, to activate the compressor to reduce the volume of the signal. That's basically how it works. And that's how I'm going to show you what we're going to do a little bit today. So it's really simple. It's actually a lot more simpler than what you realize. So the first things first is to add the compressor. So on the synthesizer track, so what I've got here is basically just a little 4-bar sequence, nothing major. It's just consisting of a synth track, some drums separated in 3 different tracks. You've got the bass drum, the snare, and the hi-hats, and then I've got a bass line, just like an arpeggiated bass line sort of thing. So it sounds a bit like this. So I'm just looping that round. Okay. So first things first, what we need to do is is to assign the compressor to the synthesizer. So this is the synth part which I'm going to use and create the ducking effect on. And so I'm going to select that track and I'm going to just add the compressor to that track. So in the insert, I'm going to go into the dynamics and add a compressor. So there's my compressor. Now I'll talk about settings in a little while, but first things first, what we need to do is activate the sidechain. To activate the sidechain, you can see this little icon, this little one here. Looks a bit like there's a line with a U line going out, and then basically it's like an inserting a processor. So activate that. You'll see activate, deactivate sidechain. Switch that on. That then becomes an assignable send for another channel. So I can send signal from one channel to the sidechain as the signal goes in. So it becomes essentially an assignable bus. That's basically what it is. Okay. I'm going to set up some very, very heavy compression settings so we can hear that quite clearly. And I'll talk more about the settings in a little while. But so I just brought the threshold down, brought the ratio up, leave that for now. I'll close that and close that. So what I now need to do is decide what I want to trigger the compressor. So I'm going to select the track. So I'm going to use the bass drum. So what this is going to do, if you have a look at here, you can see bass drums on beats 1 and 3. So it's going to create kind of like a pulsing effect on every first beat and third beat of the bar. I don't mean to do that. It's not doing anything yet. So on the bass drum, go into the bass drum channel. And in the send, now when I click in the send, I should see that to become an assignable bus. And you can see that it says synth insert 1 compressor. There it is. So I select that, switch it on, and I'm just going to leave it turned up full. Normally the default level would be 0. I just turn it up full for now. Okay, so what's now happening is the bass drum, this channel is sending signal from the bass drum to the compressor, which is allocated on the synthesizer. All right. So what I should find now is automatic. Now that's basically how it works. That's all you really need to do. So put the compressor on the synth, activate the sidechain, go on to the channel you want to send to it, go on the send, activate the send, and away you go. So what we should be now hearing is some sidechaining occurring. So you can hear the ducking effect occurring now. And obviously, the key thing is now is looking at the kind of settings of how much ducking I want to have in my track. So I can choose now. I've just muted the rest of the tracks just so you can hear the effect a bit more appropriately. So on the synth now, I can open up the compressor, and I can start to experiment a little bit with how the different settings. So if I want the effect to be really, really obvious, then I can turn the ratio and the threshold up and down. So you can see the difference when I bring the threshold down. And obviously affecting the ratio by how much compression is taking place will determine how much of that kind of almost like fade-in effect I get. So you see I'm adjusting there the release setting. So that's basically, in essence, sort of releasing the sound earlier, therefore increasing, almost speeding up the effect. So I can make that effect a lot more subtle by increasing the release. Or I can make it much more obvious by decreasing the release. Same thing with the attack. So rather than almost starting from 0 and kind of sweeping up, I can kind of decrease that effect a little bit by slowing the attack. So it all depends on what kind of sound that you want to go for within that. You can play around a little bit with makeup gain. So if you really want a heavy, a really kind of obvious effect, increase the makeup gain, bring the threshold down, bring the ratio up, release an attack as fast as I can. And then you can then hear that, how it sounds with the rest of the track. And the thing is, you can assign that to anything. You can assign that to, any rhythmic pattern that you want within there. So the hi-hats you could, but in theory it wouldn't be. The attack of the compressor is too slow in order to make that kind of usable effect. But if you want something a bit more kind of rhythmic, sort of like more pulsy, then obviously you could have 4 to the floor bass drums. I just wonder if I just duplicated that part very, very quickly into something that looks a bit like, oh, hang on, sorry. Don't know what I quite did there, but so if I did that, you'd hear this a much more pronounced effect. I think then it's considering whether or not the compressor settings are correct. Do I need to have maybe a more sort of obvious effect to create that kind of process? But you can create really nice, interesting kind of pulsing effects by doing that. So it's a nice, easy way to create some, and the thing about it is with any processor of that nature is not to use it over the top. Is maybe being a bit subtle with it. And maybe thinking a little bit about, well, maybe I could just activate that on one bar, use automation to deactivate the compressor, and then use automation to switch it on in one little section to create a bit of rhythmic interest. So it's a nice, easy way to create something quite interesting in relation to synthesizers and stuff like that. And like I say, in modern pop and stuff like that, you hear that sidechaining effect quite a lot. I'm going to sorry, apologies. I'm going to show you one more technique that you can use with sidechaining. So to do that, what we're going to do, I'm going to remove the compressor, and I'm going to add a noise gate to the synth instead. Let me just bring up channel settings and add a noise gate instead. So you can do the same thing. So rather than a compressor creating that kind of ducking effect, we could use a noise gate. Now, a noise gate, as we know, simply just opens and closes. So in there, once I activate the sidechain, I'm not going to worry too much about settings yet. I'll figure those out in a second. Okay. What I can then do, I could, say, for example, use the hi-hats. So let me get the hi-hats up and activate the send. And now what's going to happen, it's going to create, based on the hi-hat rhythm, it's going to create like an open and closing effect, like a stuttering effect on the synth. Now you can hear where it's kind of only triggering the synth at certain points. A lot of that is going to be down to the threshold. So I've got quite a lot of varied velocity on my hi-hats. So let me see now if I bring out, let's open up the noise gate. Let's bring the threshold down. So you can hear now, I've brought the threshold down, so therefore the hi-hats are triggering the different hi-hats, all the hi-hats are triggering the noise gate. You can use that to effect as well, because if you separated hi-hats at different velocities, you could set the threshold in between the two, and then you could trigger it from just certain hi-hats, which could be quite a cool little effect as well. But what I'm also going to show you how you can create a really obvious stuttering effect. You can hear the release on the synth now. So if I bring the release right down, literally to 10 milliseconds, we'll create a really short stuttering effect. So that kind of effect can be used quite effectively. And again, you could do the same thing with automation. So I could say, for example, I want to bypass the noise gate, and I'm going to put write mode on. So what I'm now going to do, I'm going to write some automation which is going to bypass the noise gate at certain points, switch it on and off, basically. So I'm going to bypass it and just have it on at bars 2 and 4. So you can see now the automation, I can tidy that up a little bit. Tidy that up, tidy that up, tidy that up. And you can see now you've got this a bit of, again, it's all about kind of textural variation. You know, it's all about making tones and sounds more interesting. So now, So you can do those kind of processes quite easily by using those effects. And you can, it's a really nice, easy way of creating that kind of stuttery vocal effect. I heard it recently. I don't know if anybody's, there's a new Apple advert, which is for the new iPhone 16, which talks about Apple intelligence and stuff like that, and it's got the girl from Last of Us who plays the young girl who's being sort of escorted across the country by Pedro Pascal. And if you listen to the music at the end, you can hear they've got like a noise gate stuttery effect on the vocal. It's exactly that effect, where it's got like a long note, and it's basically using a noise gate to kind of rhythmically create the effect. One of the good things about this, and what you could also look at doing, is with the send. So say, for example, you wanted almost like an invisible trigger for this. So I'm going to kind of get rid of this automation just to show it a bit more obviously. So now it's back on all the time. Now, if I wanted to, I could, let me duplicate, no, right. Say if I didn't have that, I didn't want those hi-hats in there. Now, the problem is when I mute the hi-hats, the effect is gone. So hang on, let me just. So we should be. My bypass is on. That's the problem. Let me just switch that off. No. Sorry, my mouse keeps freezing for some reason. All right. All right, there we go. Now, at the moment, I can hear the hi-hats, but if I didn't want the hi-hats in the mix, as soon as I mute them, it's not triggering the gate, so therefore the gate is closed. So the gate is closed all the time. I can't trigger it. But what I could do, I could use what we call a pre-fade send. At the moment, if I just show you, this is a good example of demonstration of what we call pre-fade and post-fade sends. So at the moment, you can hear the hi-hats. If I remove the hi-hats from the mix, this send is a post-fade send. So therefore the send is going after the fader. So if I bring the fader down, I cut the feed to the sidechain. Therefore the sidechain noise gate stays closed and therefore it doesn't activate. So I can now it's not going above the threshold. And now it's above the threshold. But I can turn the send from a post fade to a pre fade. So now the send is going no matter what I do to the fader. So now, if I mute it, I still reduce this. I still remove the signal to the sidechain. But by bringing the signal down in the fader, I can create the same stuttery effect, but without the hi-hats being in the mix. And you could use that. Say, for example, you had like a really distinctive rap vocal sample with a really distinctive rhythm, and you want to use that rhythm and apply that rhythm to another track. You could do that really easily by just doing a bit of sidechaining to a synth chord or whatever it was, a guitar chord or something like that, to create that kind of really cool rhythmic stuttering effect. So that's it for today. That's all I'm going to show you. It's just how you think you can use sidechaining is kind of, they're the two most common uses, like noise gates and using compression. One of the key things about the Component 4 exam is you will be expected to use sidechaining in your Component 4 exam. So, you best get on it. The more you use it, the more familiar you'll be with the process and the concept. But it's a really cool tool to use in your compositions, and think about how you might use it in your compositions to make that really nice, cool effect that you... Cool, isn't it? Right, anyway, that's it for me today. I will see you another time.